here. So that's we'll teach you a little more about our research. Of course, there's a lot of research also on shallow reefs like the one that we're at today. And we'll be talking a little bit more about that during our program, which I think will be underway in just one more minute. Oh, actually, 0 minutes. Time, 2:30. How about it? All right. Okay, so welcome everyone to the California Academy of Sciences. My name is Sarah. I'm a we're here, and joining us inside our coral reef, Andy, our diver. Everyone give a hello and a wave.
Good afternoon, Sarah, and welcome everybody to the Philippine Coral Reef Exhibit. And before we get started, I'd like to say hello to my mom, who's watching us on YouTube right now.
Yes, fun fact, you can watch this tank online anytime you would like, but today you get to see it in person, and we get to ask diver Andy, how does it feel to be on the other side of the window here in that tank?
Well, it's wonderful. Not only do we have all these beautiful fish and all the interesting coral right behind me, but the best part is the water is about 78 degrees, so it's really nice.
And you mentioned we're in the Philippines. Why are we in the Philippines of all the coral reefs of the world?
Well, scientists from the Academy have been visiting and studying the Philippine Coral Reef for over 40 years. And the reason they keep going back there is the Philippine Coral Reef is the most biodiverse habitat in the entire world.
In the entire world. So let's do it by the numbers. Well, maybe we can consider the biodiversity of our tank here. So biodiversity means there are a lot of different types of animals. In our case, there are lots of different fish species in this tank, but does anyone want to guess how many different types of fish might be in this tank? Anyone want to shout out a number? I heard a 4, 100, 200. All right, we're around there. What's the answer, Andy?
We have about 115 different types of fish in this exhibit. Now, that might sound like a lot, but if you were to visit the Philippine Coral Reef with scientists from the Academy, you could see over 3,000 different types of fish.
And that number is still growing. There's still new species being discovered, hence why we keep going back over and over on these opportunities to explore this reef and learn more about it. And one thing that scientists have learned in these reefs is that there is an animal in this tank as well that helps support all of that biodiversity. It helps make a home for all of the fish and other life in the reef. Does anyone have a guess of what that animal might be? I heard some people say it. It's coral, right?
Absolutely. This is a coral reef exhibit, and we have about 80 different types of coral. We have two main types. We have hard coral and soft coral. A nice example of a soft coral is right behind me. You can see this pinkish purple thing that looks like a bush, and it's bending in the current. That bending motion allows the coral to capture food. Another nice soft coral is down here behind where Sarah is standing. You'll see these things that look like pieces of white rope sticking up from the bottom. That is called whip coral. Now, we also have hard coral. One nice hard coral is back here. You'll see this greenish coral. It looks like antlers all tangled up, and that's called staghorn coral. And that's a good habitat for baby fish because all those little spaces between the branches give fish a place to hide.
That's right. So it's hard to believe that corals are animals because they sit still on the rock. They're not swimming or walking around, but they are animals. And if you look up a little closer at these colonies, you can see what makes them more like animals. So I've got here in my hand a picture of a coral colony zoomed up close. So if you were to look really closely at any of these corals that we're looking at, you'd see that it's made up actually of hundreds or even thousands of these little animals that are called polyps. So coral polyps all work together to build these colonies, and each one, you can see, has little tentacles it uses to catch its food and a mouth in the center that it puts that food into. And in the case of those hard corals that Andy was talking about, they build a hard skeleton that they use for protection, but also that skeleton actually creates the coral reef over time. Andy, how does that work? How does a coral actually create these coral reefs, these big structures that we see?
Well, the coral polyps are soft like a little jellyfish, but they actually have a skeleton made out of calcium carbonate, which is very hard. When the coral polyps die, their skeleton remains, and the new coral polyps grow on top of the old skeletons. And over thousands and thousands of years, it creates these huge, hard coral reefs that are shaped just like this structure behind me.
So I should mention each of those little polyps, it's smaller than your pinky fingernail, but over time they can grow into coral reefs like the Great Barrier Reef that we can see from outer space. These massive structures are home to all kinds of life. They're like the rainforest of the ocean. We see lots of different fish species, as we mentioned, but also lots of other animals from sea stars to urchins, and these fish also support huge ocean life. Things like sharks and whales, huge fish in the ocean, all are part of the food webs that begin on our coral reefs. So we estimate that 1 in 4 types of animal in our oceans, some part of its life relies on a coral reef. So these are pretty essential parts of our ocean. Andy, you are a diver. What places have you dived in the world?
I have been to the Florida Keys, which is a coral reef, and also Hawaii, which has some small reefs.
Now, coral reefs are, of course, incredible places to go diving, to go see these magnificent fish, but they also really help out people in a number of different ways. Andy, how do you and I and everyone here benefit from having coral reefs in our oceans?
Well, for people that live near in the Philippines or Indonesia, people who live near the coral reefs, they actually build these walls that are shaped like this. If there is a large storm, like a hurricane or a tropical storm, and they produce waves or even a tsunami wave, these coral reefs actually dissipate the energy from the waves, and they protect all the communities along the coast. And as Sarah mentioned, coral reefs are also very productive places for fish populations. They've estimated about 1 billion people in the world rely on fish from the coral reef as their primary source of protein.
Wow, so these are pretty special places. I'd almost say we, too, are part of coral reef ecosystems. So certainly we need to help protect these places, make sure that they are thriving for generations to come. There's a lot of ways that even here in San Francisco, though we may not live next door to a coral reef, we can help protect these places. One thing we can do is to support public transportation as a community. Now, you might be wondering, how can I, getting on the bus, help protect the coral reef? And you may tell us a little bit more about a change that's happening reef that has to do with what we do here.
Right. Whenever we burn fossil fuel like coal or gasoline, we release carbon into the atmosphere. Now, the ocean actually absorbs some of that carbon, but this makes the ocean water slightly acidic. And this is very bad for coral reefs because when the ocean water becomes acidic, the coral skeleton gets soft and they eventually die. And this is called ocean acidification, and it's going on all over the world right now.
That's right. So to have our corals being able to build those skeletons that create these coral reefs and this habitat for all of these animals, we need to keep our ocean chemistry the way it has been for millions of years. And we can do that here by producing less of that carbon dioxide, burning few of those fossil fuels, and that means creating ways for us to get around without doing that, making sure we have strong public transit systems options that let us be able to leave our cars behind and get where we're going. So that's definitely a way we can help reefs as far away as the even in California. All right. Well, Andy, you said you love taking questions for our audience. What do you say? Do you think we can get a couple audience questions to do our fish feed?
Absolutely, sir.
All right. Well, now is your chance. Do any of you have something you've been wondering about that you'd like to ask Diver Andy this afternoon? Yeah, what's your question? Yeah, okay, let's count up all the fish in here. How many total in this whole tank?
We have about 1,400 different fish in this tank.
Wow, you counted really quickly.
I did.
All right, any other questions? I think I saw another hand. Over here, yes. All right. We're wondering, what are all of these fishes called? Now, I don't think you could tell us the name of all 115 or we'd be here till tomorrow, but maybe you could tell us a few of your favorites.
You might notice all these tiny orange and purple fish that are clumped over here. Those are called anthias. And anthias are really interesting because when they're born, they're all born as female. There are no males. And all the females live together in a group called a harem. The largest and strongest female goes through a natural process, and she turns into a male over a period of a few weeks. And when she becomes the leader, becomes a male, she has a bright purple square spot on her side. And usually she hangs out right about here. You can't see her right now.
I don't see him right now, but if you spot that square spot, Anthias, let us know.
Actually, there he is, up there.
Oh, yes, right up there with the square. So that's the one male in the whole group. It's one of my favorite fish as well. All right, I see a question in the back. Yeah, so how do coral reefs have all these different colors, and why, for that matter?
Scientists are not really positive. They believe that a lot of the fish's color has helped them attract mates so they can reproduce and produce babies, and then the population grows. And they also differentiate each other from other colorful species on the reef.
Yeah, the fish are certainly colorful, and maybe it could be that they're trying to camouflage with the coral, and it's kind of interesting also why coral are so colorful. So coral animals themselves, they have no color. They're clear, translucent animals, but when we look at them, they look very colorful, all kinds of shades, and that's actually the color of some algae that lives inside this animal. So there's a plant algae that lives inside the coral animal, gives its color. It actually also captures sunlight, synthesizes, makes food it shares with its. So there's something about corals that's my favorite fact about corals.
Absolutely.
I think why they're so colorful. All right, I think we can take one more question from this gentleman over here. Hi. Yes. Oh, so there are two questions here. Fishes and reefs. So why do fishes live in reefs? And can they live close to reefs, like piranhas? Are there any piranhas in coral reefs?
First, the reason that fish like coral reefs, again, if you look at this staghorn coral, all those branches, when they tangle up, they create little spaces, and those are spaces where little tiny fish can live. So the large fish come to the coral reef, they can have babies and reproduce, and small fish will live their entire life near those coral.
Yeah, and while there aren't any piranhas on coral reefs, there are definitely other predatory fish that would eat other fish. So having these corals to hide in and stay safe is definitely important for these fish. Although in this tank, our biologists have been very careful to choose fish that won't eat the other fish. So it's a bit more of a peaceful environment in this indoor tank. All right, so those are some great questions. I want to get on to our last promised agenda item of the day, my favorite part. Andy, what's next?
Well, in a minute, we're going to feed these fish. My dive tender is actually up on the dive deck, and he's got some food for them. And when we give him a countdown and the signal, he's going to do something called a broadcast feed. And that's a sophisticated name that means he's basically going to take the food and throw it into the water. And you can watch all the fish swarm around and get their lunch.
All right. Well, I need all of your help then to give the signal to the dive tender that it's time to feed the fish. So let's count down from 3 down to feed those fish all together. Are you ready? Are you ready? Yeah. Okay. We're ready to go. All right. Let's go with a 3, 2, 1. Feed those fish. Woo. All right, Andy, that was spectacular. I have 2 more quick questions for you. The first is, what is on the menu today?
So today they're getting 3 things. They get protein pellets, which is basically dried fish meal. They're getting algae flakes, which is like salad if you're a fish. And they also get dried seaweed, which is like the nori that we use to wrap sushi in.
Delicious. And my second question is, we just learned all about these anthias are endeared to them, and now I'm looking at them. It doesn't look like they got any food. What about the anthias and the little guys down here?
Right, so you might notice that the large fish are like bullies. They push their way in and try to gobble up all the food first. Fortunately, the big fish are also slobs. They chew the food so fast that most of it actually falls out the side of their mouth, and it sinks down through the water column. Now, the small fish are pretty smart. They've realized that if they just hang back and wait their turn, they can eat all that crunched up food that's fallen out from the big fish. And in the end, everybody gets plenty to eat.
And those are maybe the smarter, more patient fish that wait down below for the scraps.
Exactly.
All right. Well, a small lesson from a small fish.
Exactly.
All right. Well, Andy, thank you so much for getting in the water this afternoon. Thank you for all coming out and visiting us today. Let's give Andy a round of applause. And thank you, Andy, for getting in the water.
Thanks, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day at the Academy of Sciences.
Yes, so as we wrap up today, if you have any more questions, come and talk to me. You can come up to the window and get a high five through 7 inches of acrylic with Andy if you'd like a photo for the road. And Andy getting out of the water upstairs by the planetarium in a few minutes if you just say to him with his mask off. Thanks so much. Have a good rest of your day.